my internet went down because a cat got it.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay, you want to get started, team?
Yes, it is 2:00. Let's get it going.
Alrighty. So welcome everyone. This is the first intermediate session for our remote learning of 2021. And we're excited to be here with you. And we thank you for taking time out of your day to come here. To start out with our land acknowledgement. So we'd like to just acknowledge that the land on which we are gathered is part of the traditional territory of the Chippewa, Odawa, Potawatomi, and Delaware nations. And by personally making a land acknowledgement, we are taking part in the act of reconciliation, honoring the land and the Indigenous heritage. Okay, perfect. So welcome. My name is Denise Ladd, and I am an elementary instructional coach, and I'm joined by Team. Go.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining us. Hope you had a good, successful first day back remote learning with your students. We've heard from a few of our participants, and it sounds like participation has been pretty good so far. And if not, be confident that I'm sure it will improve for you over the week.
We hope to be joined by some of our virtual school teachers who are teaching at the virtual school at either Blenheim or Petrolia at LCCBI. And they are a huge source of information with their experience. And Tina and I hope they're here to share some of their information with you.
Yeah, I see Derek's here now. Welcome, Derek. Thank you for helping us out today.
Perfect. Welcome, Derek.
Hello.
So here's just a little brief outline of what we hope to accomplish today. We're going to talk a little bit about the remote learning memo that went out and some of your options that are available. We're going to talk about the structure of a daily program that might be a possibility for you. And again, we'll talk to Derek, and I think Melissa Holmes is going to be joining us at some point today too, to give us some insight on that. And then we're going to touch base with some of their more guidance and their ideas about other things that pop up. And hopefully we'll have a little Q&A session at the end where you can pick their brains about some things. So one of the things that we hear from folks, whether it was from last spring or from our folks at the virtual school this year, that engaging students is always a challenge, and intermediate folks seem to be a little bit harder to get them involved with. So one of the things that Tina and I thought we could do is show you something called a chatbot challenge. And this comes by way of Melissa Dent. She shared this. So this one particularly is about just in the chat box, I want you to just type some foods that start with a T. So if we wanted to start doing that now, we can you know, that goes where that leads us. And, you know, this is a good way just to get your kids, the ones that are a little shy, they're a little apprehensive about getting into the online learning. It's like an open invite for them just to get in. They can just start typing in the chat. And then if things tend to go a little bit, well, I guess you can invite someone to bring in on the mic.
Tar. Nice one, James. Yeah, is that so much of what teachers are going to be doing this week is building that sense of community within the classroom, as well as like while you're doing that, you're thinking about what structures am I going to set up as we move forward, because you know right now we're planning on 4 days of remote learning, but you know the future is uncertain, and we'll see kind of how things play out through the rest of the year. But you know, I think sometimes for me, what I'm thinking about too is often we kind of think about remote learning and like, well, I can't do this and I can't do that, and you know, kind of the deficit way of thinking about remote learning. But you know, as I'm sure the remote teachers will be able to speak to as well, is like there's a lot of really good advantages about remote learning. One of the things that I saw that was really powerful was how students could use the chat function as kind of like sidebar conversation, as ways of like getting kids to engage in a less threatening way than you know, when kids have to put up their hand and they have to wait their turn. And another interesting thing I found as well was that students would put a question in the chat, and us as teachers, we wouldn't have to answer that question. Another student would already like jump in and answer that question or offer some advice. So a really great way of like, bringing some democracy to our online classroom. So tiramisu, you guys got tentacles.
That's what I was thinking too. Whoever put that in there, yeah.
I have a video of Evelyn having some squid tentacles. So it's a real thing.
That's a keeper, yeah. And I think you raised a couple good points there, team. Like the chat, it's a good way too to also talk about etiquette by starting out with one of these chat box challenges. You can set the expectations with your kids of what you expect from them, what's acceptable, what's not acceptable, how to behave in the chat. It's all things that I think that they need to learn how to do in order to have a successful online learning environment. Okay.
Well, and I know that a lot of people, the remote learning is not new to you because you had a chance to do it in the spring. Does anybody want to share anything or unique or interesting ways that they use the chat or some of the advantages of chat when you were doing remote learning, either in the spring or if you're a remote teacher now? I know I'm kind of putting you on the spot, so just wanted to give people a chance to share.
Can I say one thing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, it is an advantage, but the one thing you have to do is make sure that either you're the first one in the meet or you refresh your meet each time, because if the kids get in there before you, okay, whoever's first one in has control of the chat. So if you're the teacher and the chat goes a little sideways, you want to be able to shut her down. So there's a button up in the top right. So either you reset and have a new Google Meet each time, which is very simple to do, or you make sure you're the first one in. I hide mine each night so that the next morning I come on, I go back in my settings, I turn on my link, and then I make sure I'm the first one in. So I have control of the chat. So that's pretty important, because you always have the one or two kids that kind of use it to get a little off topic too.
Right. Good point.
So while we're talking about that, Derek, would you mind sharing? So what do you do with your, I believe it's French that's prepped out for you, correct?
Mm-hmm.
So does the French teacher create a separate link, or does French teacher
Mr. Gartshore creates his own links. So I'm assuming it's so he can have control. And when I have Miss Quigley's class for math and phys ed, I send the link. It's easy to do. Just set up another Google Meet. You copy and paste the link and you just put it in the stream on the outside of the class. So they are pretty easy to do. Some people may panic about having to set up all these different meets, but it's not that hard once you get used to it.
Right. And there's videos out there that show you how to create your own Google Meet link. And there's the way to do it on a calendar where once you create it, it can be there all week. So
yeah.
That way you only have to really create it once. But okay.
I don't think that far ahead, but
thanks, Derek. You're a wealth of knowledge. We're going to lean on you a lot.
Yeah, keeping it real for us, Derek. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay. So again, this is just like, you could put anything in here. You could put in 2 pictures and ask kids to make a comment about, like something to notice that's going on in the chat. Just a way to kind of get kids engaged and to get them using the chat function. Right.
And what you will usually find is that the earlier you can get students to engage and to participate, like that will continue throughout the rest of the lesson, or kind of throughout the rest of your time together, just by kind of like building that norm right from the beginning.
For sure. Okay. The next thing that we're going to talk about is we're just going to briefly talk about the memo that was put out from the board office about options and student choice. And this is probably how you folks spent most of your morning today, was touching base with your students and finding out what their thinking is on this topic. We just really want to know if anybody has any questions about this, or if anybody has any thoughts.
I'm interested if anyone would share kind of like what the split is. Are you finding families are choosing option 1 over 2, or How does that look for our group?
Mine want number one predominantly.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat as well. At Winston Churchill, we've got the majority in option one.
Is that similar to what was happening last spring? Just curious.
Not quite the same, although I didn't teach 7 and 8 last spring, so I guess it's a little different. I was 5, 6, but it was very different last time. Much less participation. So quickly, especially, it was a lot slower.
Mm-hmm. I think the students are getting used to it as much as we can say that as educators, we're getting a little more comfortable with this. I think the students are starting to realize that this might be the way it is for some people.
Well, and I think it really speaks to what you guys have all done as teachers, as you built these really strong relationships with students, and you really are kind of part of their lives, and they're taking option one because they get to continue that relationship and kind of see you every day and be part of that community. So kudos to everybody. That's cool.
Mm-hmm. So we don't want to waste your time and talk about things that you probably talked about this morning with your own staff. Again, if at any point in time anyone has any questions, teens watching the chat, type them in there, or feel free to any time to unmute your mic and jump in and just talk to us about the conversation.
Yeah, and let's just take we'd love our conversation to be fairly free flowing. So as questions or thoughts arise, or if you have points that you'd like to bring up, please feel free to bring them up. We don't have a set schedule or agenda of the things that we'd like to discuss today. We really want to make sure that the things that we discuss are the things that are going to be meeting the needs that you guys have.
Okay. So this was probably one of the questions that you had this morning with your admin, and probably where a lot of folks were spending their time this morning, was figuring out the needs and the availability of devices at your school. So again, if there's questions on this, please feel free to bring them forward. If not, we'll just keep right on motoring here. So Tuesday to Friday of your week, I guess. Again, we're curious to see what, if anybody had their staff meeting this morning, what message was delivered by your administrator about what their Tuesday to Friday is hopefully supposed to look like. Anybody care to jump in on that? Like, we're reviewing concepts from before the break, and maybe going back to touching on some things that were areas of like problematic areas for some students. We're just curious, T and I, because we obviously aren't in schools right now, but I think it's important that the keep things as simple as possible is important, and kind of like what that really looks like with students. Like, what does simple look like in your mind when it comes to how you're approaching this topic with your students?
Yeah, I know, like my wife is a teacher as well. She's just grade 2, and a lot of our discussions over the weekend were like really centered around this idea of like keeping things simple, and also thinking about how do we design things online. So for her, she has younger students, but I think that it's applicable for all students, is like, making sure that our instructions are really clear, like maybe kind of reading them out loud or sharing them with somebody, using visuals, those types of things. Can you try going to the next slide for a second, Denise? I don't know if I tried to move a slide. I just want to make sure that it shows up.
No.
Okay. No.
You want me to get out of it and get the new?
Yeah, if you can just maybe refresh it.
Mm-hmm. I think it's also important to know that, like, you might hear some folks talk about, from the virtual school, and they've had a little bit more practice with it. They might have multiple breakout rooms, and they might manage those things. Like, if this is going to be just for this week, I would say keep it as simple as possible and have one link and have one meet room and just kind of keep everybody hanging out in there. And, you know, you can have them mute if they're working independently, and those that want to stay can stay.
Yeah, I think for my wife, a lot of it was like she was excited by, oh, I can do this and I can do this and I can do this. And although like I know she was excited about it, I'm like, you got to remember that we've got to bring our students with us and our families with us, and they don't always have the same, you know, technical expertise that that we might have.
Okay. There we go. This is the one you wanted to talk about?
Yeah, well, just because since we were talking about devices, I thought it was a good place to kind of interject this piece, was that one of the big concerns that we heard over the day so far has been students not having their passwords. So this is an email account set up for student and family support. So if students are having difficulty getting logged on, if they need a password reset, this is an email address that you can share with families, and they will, and Chris Moore from the virtual learning school said that they have been very responsive and they're really quick to get in and support families. So we wanted to make sure that was something that we shared today as well.
Right, and Chris Moore said it's just as simple as sharing this email address with the parents. They email from their home address or home email address or whatever personal email address, and very quickly they'll get the student's password changed.
Yeah, one of the words of warning from Chris and his experience with his staff from early in the year was that teachers become quickly overwhelmed with kind of being in support. So being able to offload this to IT might be something that's helpful.
Mm-hmm. So I would just keep this email handy myself, and I would, you know, because they're going to send you emails when you're in the middle of teaching a lesson. So if you just have this handy. Oh, and we should share too, team, that we're going to have show notes available at the end where we put all of this information. So don't worry about trying to screenshot anything, folks. Like the slide deck and any kind of links or resources that we are sharing with you today, they'll be in the show notes.
Yeah, and for anybody who's joining us for the first time today, we ran office hour sessions in the spring, and all of those have been archived as well. So in the show notes, all of the links that we're sharing today will include the links from the sessions that we did in the spring if you want to go back and take a look at any of those resources as well.
That's my cue for the slide too, team. Sorry.
Oh.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I stole your thunder, Denise. I'm sorry.
No, Melissa's trying to get in. I'm not sure if she made it or not. She couldn't find the link, Melissa Holmes.
I will send it to her.
It's on the program memo. I clearly can't do two things at once here, so. And we'll just move along. This is also where you'll find the other memo too. If you happen to not know what a memo is, if somebody's referring to it, you can go to the LKDSB website and you can look up right here. You see under the elementary program, there's a link to the blog. There's a link to the elementary remote learning resources. And there's a link to the memos that are put out by program, if you ever want to refer to those. So one of the questions that comes up quite a bit, and so Tina and I are just kind of anticipating this might be a problem for you. Google Classroom has that option where parents can get added as guardians. And if you invite them as guardians, they have access to seeing a summary of what their child does for the week, any work that's due or past due, things like that. So there is a slide deck that was put out. Megan Boss of the MDT team and maybe Melissa Dent had some help in this too. I'm not quite sure. They put this slide deck together. So if you have parents that are wanting to know more about Google Classroom, this is a slide deck they can look at. If anybody here is wondering about how they can add or invite parents as guardians on their Google Classroom, there are videos out there to support that as well on the blog. So just curious, I'm anticipating most intermediate teachers are using Google Classroom and probably were using Google Classroom prior to the break. You're pushing out work or pushing out assignments for kids. So I'm just curious, and just jump on the mic and let us know how many of you actually already have your parents' emails added as guardians on Google Classroom, or if anybody has any questions about this. Derek, are you using Google Classroom?
Yeah, absolutely.
And you have the guardians invited, like with their personal emails, or no?
I would say I have about, let's say about 80%. I could probably go into Aspen and get the other few, but I had sent an email out before and that's who responded. So
yeah, well, they have to do something on their end, right?
Yeah, Aspen's a little bit harder to navigate. You have to get their email. You can't copy and paste it, and it's a little more work, but they're there for most kids anyway.
And there's Melissa. She's joining us. Hi, Melissa.
Hi.
How'd your day go?
Oh, it's good. I don't like working from home, but hey, whatever. Have to get used to it for at least this week.
So you were going to LCCBI then on site to work?
Yeah, it's just helps me get the less distractions, right? And everyone's home now trying to do their schoolwork, so yeah. But
so do you use Google Classroom?
Do I use it? Yeah. Yep. So I use it. And this year I did something different. In the past, I don't know, everyone kind of uses it different. I used to set up different Google Classrooms for every subject. So I'd have like a math class, science, social studies. But this year I made topics so that it was like streamlined into one place. And I know that's kind of the message the board's been given, right? Like the less places that kids and parents need to go, the better. But yeah, and I have most of my parents are linked, and because they're in grade 8, I found a lot of them were already connected to their child's Google Classroom because they've used it before grade 8, right? So yeah, but it works well. Not so well on iPads, but
I was going to say, do you find it easier to go from like use the topic tab, or do you prefer the where you had it before, where you had separate classrooms?
I like the fact that it's all in one spot, so that sometimes when you post, it always goes to that mainstream, and kids. I find it's easier for some students to navigate it, and it also. The only thing I find with the virtual school, because we post everything, absolutely everything goes through Classroom, right? It gets really full. So we've kind of been talking about, do we start a new classroom for term 2 so that we can get like fresh and start over? Because if you delete stuff, then you lose it off your grade book in Google Classroom. So yeah, I think that's what I've landed on, to just start a new class once term 2 starts and have a blank slate.
I never even thought of that, but I bet you it does get it. And then once it gets full, it's hard. I agree with you. It's hard to navigate through all the different.
Yeah. And another trick I learned, again for this year, because everything's digital, is things that, because we always have our daily practice things, and then I have things I'm going to assess. So I've learned to indicate like this one's really important. Like I'm assessing this with the kids, because the attendance, right, is not consistent for everybody. So some kids are only going on to Classroom and doing their work. And if they get behind, sometimes they're not wasting their time, but they're doing tasks that are really for their learning, not like for assessment anyway. So that's another little thing I learned along the way.
How do you mark that, Melissa? How do you indicate that? Do you mark it just with like a star or something, or how do you indicate that? Okay.
Well, initially I put like assessment right beside it, but that's like a huge word. And then sometimes on the feed it goes off, like, because it's too long. So yeah, an asterisk, just like, I wish you could change the font color, because then I would put them in red or something, like these are, if you're behind, these are the ones you should really get to. Just anything to help them stay organized.
Right.
in
So
their
that might be a
virtual
consideration
space.
for students that are taking, or families that are using option 2 as well, right? Like that they're not participating in the synchronous learning, that kind of like
Yeah.
helps them prioritize
Yeah.
the things that are key. Okay.
Yeah. And that's what I found. It was those kids that had the hardest time, right?
Mhm.
And then I would see like they spent a couple hours working away on things that like weren't the key things that I wanted to see them be able to do, kind of thing. So
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point.
yeah.
Good
Alright,
tips.
But
Thank you.
yeah.
awesome. So again, Melissa and Derek, we're gonna ask you about this one. So at the beginning of the year, like tech is gonna be a huge problem, I'm assuming, for most teachers this year or this week. You know, they have iPads, they have tablets, they have desktops, they have Chromebooks. There was a form that was sent out that is a good way for parents to indicate what their child has. Did you like, what was the best way that you found to kind of manage this, just so we can streamline this for our bricks and mortars educators?
Personally, I still don't know what some of my kids are on. Some days they're on their phone.
It depends on the parents.
They're on this tablet. Yeah, like it's a challenge every day because you have kids on Androids, you have kids on actual iPads, but some of the ones at school have given them are outdated. So you're trying to use certain programs and they say they can't get on. So you don't know how true it is, but you have to take their word for it at some point. But like I said, I've had kids trying to do it on their phone, certain things, and
yeah,
it's hard to say. Like it's not consistent, which I wish it was something consistent across the board. So maybe we could problem solve with them a little bit more, but like, there's going to be tech issues regardless.
Yeah. So something that teachers can help to kind of, somewhat addresses. I know this is a really hard challenge to overcome because every platform and on every device looks slightly different, and where you find it is different. I think that like helping students to know how to do a screenshot so that they can either email it to us or send it to us so we can see what they're seeing. It was interesting because my wife was setting up she was setting up her Google Classroom, and she said, like, right on the banner there, just click this link and it takes you to the Meet. Well, if you look at the student facing side of it, there's no link there.
Yeah.
And there's no way to see the student side of it from Google Meet. So I definitely see this as a tricky thing to navigate.
I've tried to use Kahoot, and then some kids can't say they can't see the questions, so then you're reading them out, and the answer all they can see is the 4 color bars. So I said it's a challenge.
Yeah, and that's exactly the same. You don't know. It's hard to troubleshoot when you like. Yeah. I'm not knowledgeable in every single type of device that's out there. So when they say, I can't do this, or that's not on mine, or that's not showing up, I'm like, okay, is it a Wi-Fi issue? Is it because
look at that?
I find with grades, if you have like depending on how long you guys are out for, like if you have a principal that will give the intermediate kids Chromebooks, that would be amazing. Because I've found, depending on the school, like some of my kids are getting like literally their iPads that probably are they're past being discarded. So they can't even get some of the apps, but I find that the Chromebooks just, they work better for intermediate. That's just my opinion. Like, or like an updated iPad, one or the other.
Fair enough.
So maybe for like this week, anything you would tell the teachers, like just to focus on, maybe like don't try and get too cute, or don't try and use too much. Like just kind of keep things simple. So then that certain things will work like well, like Google works well, right, with an iPad or a tablet or a Chrome.
Yeah.
Now, everything is Meet sometimes doesn't work well if it's an outdated one.
Yeah, I would definitely just, the different teachers I've talked to, I basically had that advice: keep it simple. I don't know what you find, Derek, but like at the beginning of all this, part of what was so overwhelming is there are so many great ideas out there, and there's so many online platforms and things you can use, but you kind of become a bit useless, and the kids get overwhelmed too if you try to introduce too much. So even just use the stuff you were already using in your classroom, and see what happens next week. Like if this is just going to be a 1 week thing, then so
don't reinvent the wheel and try to wow them.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And just so there at the bottom there's a link there for an example of a Google form, and we have that on the show notes. So again, that will be there if anybody is curious and wants to look into that or use that with their class. Okay, so I think right now, team, you and I are going to rely heavily on Melissa and Derek to go through just quickly about teaching in a Google Meet. Just talk to us about what you find works, what doesn't work. Any tips, tricks?
Yeah, I think that would be really helpful is if you could kind of teleport yourself mentally back to September, and what have you learned, right? Sort of what have you learned since then? If you could go back and start again, just like so many of our teachers are, like we're essentially kind of like starting over. What advice would you offer them about teaching in a Google Meet?
Like I said, for sure you got to have control of that chat. The chat is good. Sometimes it is hard to navigate if you're presenting your screen and navigate the chat. So it's sometimes hard to go back and forth. The kids, you have to make sure that they all have their microphones off because you don't want to hear backscreen noises or anything like that. A lot of times at the start of the year, we had kids coming in with their pets, and it was like show and tell while you're teaching. So we don't require, I don't require them to have their cameras on because we have 30 kids and you can't see 30 on the screen. And then when you're presenting, you only see 4 or 5 maybe anyway. Some kids do turn them on, but some kids turn them on for a little attention, but we don't require it. You'll find that delivering when their microphones are off usually goes pretty smooth. Like you're not seeing behavior and stopping to deal with it. So you may think you didn't teach enough because you got through the material a little bit quicker, but like I said, you don't want to overwhelm them. I'm finding now I'm doing less work in math. Like I assess them quickly on Whiteboard FI, and I do a few assessments here and there per unit. So like I said, the Google Meets actually, I find it a great delivery method. You're not dealing with behavior like you normally would in classroom. Mm-hmm. You do get the odd interruptions. You're going to have tech issues. Like today, my internet cut out 7 times, and I don't know when everybody goes online if that's going to get worse yet. And you're going to have kids that, and a hard thing is too, you're going to have to navigate between emails. Like you'll have kids say they can't get on, and it goes to your .net email, and then all of a sudden your .com one's dinging left and right because people are sending stuff there. So I find the delivery method on Google Meet very effective if the kids are paying attention, but you really don't know what's going on the other side of the screen a lot of times. I enjoy it because, like I said, you get through the stuff fairly well. It's just getting the kids to do the work afterwards, wherever it is. But I do enjoy it.
And so do you folks both have downloaded the extension on your Google Meet so you can see as many students as you can fit on your screen?
There's a tab at the bottom. You can see up to 30. So it usually comes on, it's 9, and then you can switch it, slide it over to 16 or 30.
Okay.
So I think my class is at 30, and I have 3 kids that still have never showed up this year once. So I'm really at 27. And so
yeah,
it does me well to have 30.
And do you both use multiple devices? Like you have a laptop and an iPad, or you have a screen? Like just talk to us how you do that, manage your Google Meet.
I have, well, they did just purchase a second monitor for all the virtual teachers recently. We have those so we can keep, like what I do, it's not necessary, but I basically enter myself into the meeting twice. So I always have a view of my class, and then I have a view of my screen or whatever I'm teaching from. But like I would agree with Derek, like I don't make grade 8s keep their cameras on for a lot of reasons. Like some kids literally their Wi-Fi can't handle it, and it gets pretty glitchy when everyone's camera's on. And then if you when you're trying to share anything, it just goes, it's that much more complicated. But the teaching does go more quickly. I mean, sometimes I'll say, like, are you guys still there? Like someone say something, right? Like sometimes they're more interactive and talking, but sometimes when you're doing kind of your direct teaching, it can be, you just don't have those classroom interruptions. Not to say there's not kids that unmute and like to, you still have those little issues to deal with, but yeah, it's also good to have a device you can write on, like an iPad, if you're going to use any sort of whiteboard. But I mean, some teachers here just use like have a whiteboard behind them, which I do that sometimes too. So it's really what you're comfortable with and what works for you. But I like the Google Meet too. It's pretty user friendly. But yeah, I had mine drop a lot at LCCVI. They're working on those issues still, but and then you lose control. Not, I don't mean like the kids go crazy, but you don't have control of being able to mute kids either once you get kicked out.
Mm-hmm.
So there's just those things. And then navigating, kids will email me or parents will email me thinking like I'll get it right away, like my kid's sick, and then they get a phone call that they're not there. And at 10:30 when I look at my email, then I have 2 emails from them like, I said they were sick. It's like, so just that kind of expectation from parents versus, like, usually as a teacher you don't manage those types of things, right? Like the office deals with all of that. And so just kind of that there's lots of things going on at the same time, much like regular teaching, I guess. Still different issues.
I think that's great advice too, Melissa, is because as people are setting up their classrooms and creating expectations, not just for students, but for parents, giving them the heads up right away. That is like, if you need to get a hold of me, I'm usually teaching, right? Is that
yeah.
email you won't be able to respond to immediately. And if we make that really kind of like a clear expectation or clearly communicate that for families, that's gonna help alleviate that problem. So thanks for that advice.
Yeah.
I worked through actually this. I know that some people are going to be sharing multimedia this week in their Google Meet. If you're sharing videos, I worked with a teacher earlier today through kind of how to do this. And when you're presenting and you're sharing from if you're sharing video from YouTube or audio, you want to make sure that you're sharing from a tab. And something that she wasn't aware of, that when I was working with her today, was that she had put links in her Google slide. So just like the link itself, and then clicked on that link and it opened up another window, and she didn't understand why the students couldn't see it or hear it. So if you're gonna use video and animation, and you're probably best to embed it, like insert it right into your Google slide, and make sure you share that tab. So that was something that came up today as well.
Thanks for that, team. Yeah, and this is something I learned today. So if you're, I know, Melissa, you said that when you log in, you join in the Meet to both your separate devices. I just learned this morning from somebody, I think it was Tanya, that you don't have to join in the Meet that you're sharing from. So for instance, if I have my laptop going and I'm showing, the grid view in a Google Meet from my classroom, but I'm just displaying on my iPad, I just hit share screen from my iPad, and then I don't join the actual Meet. I just share from my iPad. So I thought that was my learning moment for the day. I said to Tina, I'm done. I'm out.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I like how it says too, you're the first one here.
Yeah. Yeah. I always like to see that.
Yeah. And so I think you folks pointed out some great questions about, fighting the battle, not fighting the battle, about keeping your cameras on. And I think there are a lot more, like, it's not always something bad that's happening why kids don't have their cameras on, right? Like if you're on an iPad and you leave the meet to go work on a Google Doc, the camera shuts off, right? Or if you're having Wi-Fi issues, if you just feel more comfortable when you're working independently, not having a camera on, there are a lot of reasons why the camera not being on is not necessarily a bad thing. I don't know if go ahead.
Well, I said they're gonna have bedhead, a lot of them too.
Yeah,
Or still in
and
their pajamas. Yeah.
Yeah, and they don't, some of them don't want you to see into that part of their life, right? And depending on what's going on behind them, like sometimes when, I'm sure you find this, Derek, when certain kids unmute, you're like, how do you work in that? Like the noise and so I kind of like, just especially with the intermediate, I think you just have to be really sensitive to that. And so, to me, it's not a battle worth
because
fighting.
they may not be the only kid at the house. There might be 2 or 3 others trying to learn too.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, there's definitely an equity component there, right? That we as teachers need to consider. And I think that the nice thing that the platform allows us is that there's different ways to know if they are engaged, right? Or if they have, if they're engaging in the learning. We can ask questions. We can get them onto a Google slide and get them to work on something, or we can use whiteboard.fi, like Derek said, right? Is that there's lots of ways for us to kind of check in with students that they're still engaged in learning without having to have the cameras on.
Good point.
Yeah.
And that leads us to, I just want to talk a little bit about, in a minute, we're going to go to some sample timetables that some of the virtual teachers shared with us. And we're just wondering if you could talk to us about how do you manage the asynchronous time? Like the time when the kids are kind of independently working, and you might have, it might be your prep time, so you're not available, or it might be, you're just there, the meet is open, and if anybody pops in to have a chat with you. Just wondering if you could just share a couple points about that, Melissa or Derek, or anybody has any questions. I'm not sure, Tina, if there's any questions popping up, but.
Yeah.
So my synchronous time, I have 3 slots. I think it's Monday, Tuesday, Friday, where I don't have preps at the end of the day. So there's 60-minute slots where I have drop in, and honestly, like, there's kids that they just don't show up. Like, to them, the school's done early, but if you make an individual meeting, say I want to meet you at 2:10, then they're more likely to show up. So if you know kids are falling behind, and that's when you want to do the one-on-one, I think you need to take the initiative to say, hey, let's meet at 2:10. Don't put it on them to show up, because they won't. So that's what I'm finding. Like, I'll always have office hours. I've told kids, like, okay, you missed this quiz, time to make it up, and they still don't show up. So.
Yeah, I found the same thing, Derek, that I do have, maybe half of the class that will drop, like we'll use it kind of how it's how you hope kids will use it, like, oh, I'm working away on this and I have a question, or I really didn't get this today, and they'll come on their own. But I found with kids, like when they're behind or they missed something important, setting appointments, like, can you be here at 2:30? And like, sometimes if they miss, I always try to tell them, like in grade 8, like, I'm going to try to give you as much grace as possible, but there's going to come a point where I'm going to start emailing your parents the time that you're supposed to be there too. So, but it's pretty, mine's pretty open, and like the kids come and go. Some kids sometimes just want to talk, like, so it's kind of nice though. It's kind of like that, the time in, your recess or your clubs or whatever, that you can just kind of chat with the kids that might be missing in virtual school a little bit. So it's nice to have that too.
I heard a lot of that was that kids are craving connection. So there would be kids who would not be there for the instructional time, but then they show up at async time because they just want to sit and hang out with you and chat with you and their friends. And
Yeah, it's a lot more
heard
personal that way.
Right.
So just before we get to some of our schedules, just to go over, this was probably addressed by your administration this morning in a meeting. Attendance is done. It's going to be done online. So you do it twice a day as per the schedule that you had before the break, before remote learning. And, you know, if they're determined that they are doing the on-demand only, you mark them as present. If they are determined that they are doing the no school this week, then you mark them absent.
Yeah, we had some discussion around that this morning, and kind of like, you know, there's lots of gray here, and we are trying to be as supportive as possible. So, you know, we're marking student, you know, we're hoping to mark students here if they have engaged in some way, right? So they're completing some of the work, we are in communication with them. You know, lots of times they can't get on for various reasons. If we know why, then we want to give them some grace there and mark them present. If we haven't heard from them and they've gone AWOL, for sure we're going to mark them absent, but we want to lean towards marking them present if possible.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And just before we get to some actual samples, here's just some tidbits, and maybe again, Melissa and Derek, if you can pop in, but so school bell times are supposed to stay the same as if they were actually in the school. Be consistent with your schedule. The schedule in some lunch, recess, and take impromptu breaks if you need it. Like if you notice that the kids are getting a little antsy, you know, nothing wrong with taking a little break and putting on a Go Noodle or a just dance or something. You know, you talk to your divisional partners if you're in a school that has those. Your principal, follow the directions they have. Work in a variety of async and independent work times during the day. And your DPA could be briefly, you know, interwoven throughout the day, not just one kind of, but maybe do a couple 10-minute chunks. I don't know, what are your thoughts there, Melissa or Derek? Or team?
I like about any of it or the DPA.
Any tips you have for us? Yeah.
Scheduling tips.
Yeah, scheduling tips. So I find that I try to stay, like I have my timetable just like I would in the brick and mortar school with, and I personally have to really stick to the times, and the reason why I do that is because of like more than a face-to-face learning, you have kids are very fluid throughout the day, right? So they're kind of coming and going. So that way parents have that timetable, kids have it, so they'll know, okay, I really can't miss math, I need to be on at 10:30. I have math every day at 10:30, you know. So I tried to, and it's also like a check-in, so if kids have left to go and work on something, they're constantly having to check in when subjects transition at the I mean, a lot of kids stay on it all day, but for those kids that are not consistent, that's kind of why I try to really stick to my transition times. But as far as like the DPA breaks and stuff, yes, I agree. Like I find Mondays are really tough. Like today was a little tough with the kids after 2 weeks off. Monday mornings with grade 8s is I spend a lot more time. We have a bigger kind of chat in the morning, kind of wellness, like let's go get your hot chocolate, go get your whatever kind of thing. So it's the same as in class, right? You read the kids and you kind of know, like, this math lesson's maybe not going to be the one to do today. Let's do something a little more interactive or whatever. So it's I guess the answer is yes, it is fluid, but I do try to really stay on the structure. And a lot of parents that are like grade 8, I find with the grade 8, the parents, I might hear them working with other kids, but the parents are also really counting on that schedule, right? So if they know I need to be with my kid during language, or I need to be helping them during math, and then I switch it up, or I don't, follow it, it might mess up what they're doing with other kids. I've run into that different times, you know, where kids like, oh, well, my mom's here to help me for this time, you know, so just kind of those things that you don't necessarily have to take into account in the classroom. Sorry, Derek, I talked a lot there.
Oh, that was good. Now you make me feel bad because I switched my schedule around a little bit.
Yeah. It's not like
No,
I'd never switch it, but.
Well, I had to be flexible because I
question,
started every
please?
morning with math, and I found that a lot of kids were trickling late, like 20, 25 minutes late. So they were missing half the math lesson. So I ended up flipping. I always start with, I have math and phys ed the first block. So I flip phys ed with math just so if they want to sleep in or whatever, they're going to get marked absent, but they're going to miss phys ed, which basically is a lot less meaningless. I'm not saying it's not important in the virtual world, but I still find math would be a little bit more important for their future education.
Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question. I have to go soon and I had trouble breaking in earlier. I have one question about the embedding a video in the slide. Are you saying make a link in Google Drive and put it in there? This is addressed to Tien.
It's if you want to make sure that that video is embedded in that slide deck, don't just put a link.
What the word embedded means. How?
If you use YouTube, there's a link. There's one of the tabs will say insert video, and that's where you want to go. If you just copy and paste the link, those aren't usually not the best. If you embed it, it'll show the whole video it's kind of like it shows a smaller.
So I'm starting from the URL and I'm in Google Classroom or Google Slide. Is there not that little? It looks like a infinity symbol, the link. Is that not what you're saying, to embed it there?
No, that's not the
no.
best one. Hold on, let me bring up one.
Sorry, I couldn't hear what you said.
I'm just going to bring up a Google slideshow here.
You want to share a screen then, Derek?
Yeah, just let me navigate here and I'll grab one.
So you're saying not to go, like I wouldn't expect to go to YouTube and open it up right in YouTube. But I thought that by making the link into my Google slide, I just click on it and it would take me to it. That doesn't work, you're saying, in Google?
It will kick you off so that you will need to stop presenting that slide or that tab, and you'll have to go to another tab because it's not in the actual Google slide. Once you click on the link, you're no longer on Google Slides. So let me give me one here. Hold on. Okay, I'm going to present. Hold on.
Sorry, I would have asked this question in the chat, but
okay.
It didn't seem like anybody was looking at the chat.
No problem, Diane.
Okay, so if I don't know if you can see that. This hasn't been made yet. So I know there's the link. Are you guys seeing what I'm seeing?
Yep, go ahead.
Okay.
Yep.
So I don't know where the link is here. So usually you go over here, insert, and here you'll have the video. And then here you can copy and paste either but the URL.
Yeah.
And then it will become part of the slide where you just hit play and you don't have to stop presenting and go to a different screen. You just keep going as is.
Yeah.
It keeps it in that tab, Diane, because that's the tab
you're... I used that. I thought it was something else. He was saying you had to go to YouTube and do it there.
No, but a lot of times you cannot link videos that aren't YouTube with Google Slides sometimes. So,
right.
Like I said, if you hit video there, usually the only ones, I've had the odd ones that weren't YouTube that you can link, but a lot of them you can't even link if they're not YouTube videos. You could use an original link, but you just can't embed it into the slide, like you said.
Right. Thank you. My second question was, I did go to LKDSB in the program section and I couldn't find the link for those, I forget what the old videos from the end of last year.
Okay, so Diane, we're gonna
were they in Blogspot or were they actually in the LKDSB program?
So they're in. Go ahead, Teen. You put it in the chat. I see.
Are you talking about the sessions that our office hour sessions? Or are you talking about the videos that were produced for the district in the spring?
Both? I thought you showed us, you went to somewhere in the program, LKDSB program, and showed us something. And then when I went there, I couldn't find it. Just now. I wasn't sure where it was that you went to. So could you show us again where you went to? Because I must have misunderstood. I'd like to find the old videos. I didn't know there were two types.
Okay. I think what might be best, Diane, is I'll reach out and we'll connect privately. Does that sound
Sure.
good?
If you could email it to me because
yes.
I do have to go.
Yeah, no problem. I'll connect and then we'll go from there. Does that sound fair?
Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks. Bye.
Bye, Diane. Okay, I'm not sure if she was talking about, I don't know what she was talking about. Yeah. Okay, so so this is just a couple samples. We realize it's getting close to time, folks. So here's one that's pretty simple, right? Like it's laid out pretty, you know, you start with some literacy in the morning, you do some literature time, some math time, some science, social studies, art, some whole group time. Here's one that is actual, this is somebody from the virtual school, schedule. And it's laid out and color coded nicely. Here's another one from the virtual school. Again, it's color coded and it kind of has their prep time. So you'll see, like when it's their prep time, they share, talk with your curriculum partner to see how you want to handle it, whether they just jump on your Google Meet or whether they create their own link. With intermediate students, it's probably very doable for them to be able to jump from one meet to another. I have to imagine, Melissa and Derek, was that a doable thing, you think?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe your kids, like, you know, it's jumping from one to the other might not be so doable, but you know, bottom line is I would kind of stick to your core timetable that you have already created. And from there, you know, just kind of take it slow. You're not going to get nearly as much accomplished online as you did face-to-face. I think that's fair to assume, and give yourself some time to be able to manage that. I think a big part before we finish up here is just building that online community. So, you know, if we're at this for this week and then we're back to school again the next week, nothing's saying that we're not going to be back online again in the next month. So I think it would be important maybe to take some time and build some community online, establish some expectations, how you want the kids to behave online, how to unmute your mic, when to unmute your mic. Do you want them to raise their hand? Do you want them just to visually raise their hand? I think all of that probably is worth spending some time right now, investing some time right now to be able to get that kind of laid out on the line. Would you agree with that, Melissa and Derek?
Yeah, I would take the week and just get used to the technology.
Yeah.
Said do review.
Yeah, I agree with that. It's because, even it looks, who knows what the future holds, right? And the reality of it is the virtual learning and meetings won't probably ever go away at this point. Right. So these are good skills for the kids to have moving forward, right? So I had a hard time with that, with the spending a lot more like I always did, like the community circles and things like that, but I spend a lot more time like talking and like that kind of wellness activities, and just because the kids need it. These kids, like, the nice thing is you guys know your class already. It took a lot longer in virtual school to get to know them because of just the nature of it. But
hey, it's Rod here in the background. I just let you know that like in 60 seconds another meeting is going to start that I need to record on this computer, so we have to wrap it up, but so much information. Thanks.
Okay, thanks, Rod. So if anybody has any questions, please email Teen or myself, and we'll try and get them covered either Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday this week. We do have show notes, and Teen, if you put that link quickly in the chat, people can grab the show notes, and it is going to have everything that we've talked about and all week. And again, thank you, Melissa and Derek, for being with us today and offering us your expert advice. and they might be back tomorrow. Hopefully, fingers crossed, all week, Melissa and Derek. And we'll see you tomorrow from 2 to 3, folks. Thank you.